Dr. Sheppard, one of the best books written on the case is called The Wrong Man by James Neff. This came out maybe 7 years ago with all the updated things that have been passed down and things that they found out that they didn't know originally. And then his son co-wrote a book with an author called Mockery of Justice. I think came out in the 90s or something. Matter of fact, his son bicycled through East Liverpool, was at the wharf here, and tried to drum up support to clear his dad's name in the murder of his mother. And he traveled all across Ohio on his bicycle. But anyways, little background. The Sheppards were a family of doctors. There was Sam, of course, Dr. Sam. Then he had two brothers who were also doctors, and their dad was a doctor. And they opened up a hospital in Cleveland, in a suburb called Bay Village. I'll get that later. And in Cleveland, at Bay Village, it was an osteopathic hospital, and Dr. Sam would work there every day with his brothers and his father. Well, it's July the 3rd, 1954, and Dr. Sheppard gets called to the hospital. His wife is planning on having some people over later that afternoon, evening. Day before the 4th of July, Dr. Sheppard goes to the hospital, does some surgery, comes back. I think he had to set a guy's leg or something because he busted his ankle or something. And he comes home and he's really tired because he'd been performing so. Two good friends of theirs are there, and they're sitting in the living room in the house, talking, chit-chatting, having a few drinks and this and that. Well, Dr. Sheppard excuses himself and goes and lays down on this little daybed by the staircase that leads up to their second floor. Dr. Sheppard then fell asleep. Well, in the meantime, the guests left. They went back home. They took off. And Mrs. Sheppard had already put their little son, who was 7 years old, Samuel Reese Sheppard, and they put him to bed. And he was a heavy sleeper. I guess nothing woke him up. And they put him in his room. Mrs. Sheppard came down and said to Sam, you coming up to bed? He said, I'll be there in a little bit. And he fell back asleep. Suddenly he's awoke by screams coming from upstairs, his wife screaming. So Dr. Sam is startled, gets up off the daybed, runs up the steps, and when he gets to the first landing, he's hit in the neck with a heavy instrument, and it knocks him. He then came to and heard some noises downstairs in the living room. And when he went down there, he encountered a man who was going through the desk drawers and all the things in the house, and he went after him. Well, the guy got away, and the guy ran out the back door, and the Sheppard house was right on Lake Erie. There's a beach right outside their back. Ran out there, ran towards the lake. Dr. Sheppard took off after him. The guy hit Dr. Sheppard again, knocked him down, knocked him unconscious. He laid there by the Lake Erie shore until he came to. He then ran into the house up the stairs, and he checked his wife. His wife was laying in bed with her top pulled up, her pants pulled down, blood all over. You couldn't even recognize her. And he checked for a pulse, and there was none. He then ran to see if his son was okay. His son was sound asleep. Dr. Sheppard then ran down the steps, called, not the police, he called friends of his. The mayor of Bay Village, his name was Spencer Houck, and his wife came right over. They said Dr. Sam was just in a daze. He was just like, delirious. Well, when they got there, they called the police. The police came about 4:30 in the morning. Dr. Sam says the time of the attack was like 3:30 a.m. in the morning on July the 4th. And they, one of the big things going to be, why did you wait an hour before you called the police? Why didn't you just call the police right away? Well, Dr. Sheppard, then the police come, and the coroner of up in Cleveland, Sam Gerber, comes. They secure the property, the crime. They go up and check everything out. They found no forcible entry. They found nothing in, or windows broke, anything. And they noticed also that the Sheppards had a dog and it never barked. They questioned Dr. Sam a little bit. What happened? He says, I ran up the steps, and when I was going up to the first landing on the steps, I got struck by a man that had bushy hair. Well, Dr. Sam then was taken by his brothers to the hospital and checked, and he had some facial injuries, neck injuries, everything, and Dr. Sam went to the hospital. The police are going around and looking, and they're starting to think, this almost looks staged, because the drawers downstairs that the burglar supposedly was going through with Dr. Sam hurting on, they were just pulled out real nice and easy. You think of somebody robbing out and throwing stuff all over. And they start to think, this almost looks staged, like this was a staged situation. As time went on, Dr. Sheppard, of course, told the police his story about the bushy-haired man coming in and this and that and that. And they had no suspects, although the coroner, Sam Gerber, who'd been there for 25 years, kind of was getting the feeling that Dr. Sheppard had murdered his wife and then staged this scene. Well, the Cleveland Press, the Plain Dealer, the editor of the Plain Dealer starts printing front page stories. When are the police going to wake up and arrest Dr. Sam? Everybody in town knows he did it. He did it. He couldn't have been no bushy-haired man. Although witnesses who were in that area actually saw a man leaving 3:30, 4:30 in that area that had a bushy hair. And the police took their descriptions down, actually made a sketch and put it out there. Has anybody seen this man? Dr. Sheppard was then put through what they call an inquest, a coroner's inquest. They did it at a high school gymnasium. And I guess it was out of control. I mean, people were there, it was just there going crazy, everything that was going on. And Dr. Sheppard was put through this, and he testified for like 4 hours and told the story. He said, look, I already told you what happened that night. And he told, well, again and again and again, pressure was put on Dr. Sam. And the press continued to say, what is wrong with our police? Why? Well, eventually the pressure and the inquest hearing, people started to believe Dr. Sheppard did it. So, he is then arrested and he's put on trial in October of 1954 for the murder of his wife. His wife, the cause of death, she was hit like 25 to 35 times in the head with a blunt instrument. I mean, she was hit so bad that even Dr. Sam couldn't even recognize his wife's face because of the beating she took. And they never could figure out what caused it. They never found any murder weapon or anything. And Dr. Sam, his wife, Marilyn was her name. She was 30 years old and she was pregnant at the time. Okay? Well, they start doing, for the trial, they start looking into things. And they're starting to come up with a motive of why Dr. Sam, if he did this, why he did. Well, they asked Dr. Sam at the inquest, Dr. Sheppard, are you having any affairs? Are you seeing other women? No, I'd never do that. I love my wife. Well, at the trial, they found a lab technician at the osteopathic hospital that Sheppards ran. They found a lab tech, and she came forward and said, I've been having an affair with Dr. Sam. Then they found out that he had other affairs years and years and years. Well, now they're saying now he's a liar. So that, things are starting to mount for this trial. Gerber says at the trial, the coroner, that he believes the murder weapon was a surgical instrument. Now, who has a surgical instrument? A doctor, And the lawyer said, well, Dr. Gerber, have you come to the conclusion what surgical instrument this was? He said, no, I haven't been able to find one. Well, what makes you? Well, we know it's some kind of surgical instrument. We're still looking into it. Well, Sam takes the stand, and to his horror, they call in the lab tech, Susan Hayes, and they put her on the witness stand. Have you had an affair with Dr. Sheppard? Yes, I have. So right away, what else is he lying about? He's already lied about this. Well, Dr. Sheppard takes the stand and said, Dr. Sheppard, you said you didn't have an affair with anybody. He said, well, my wife knows that she knew about that. I confessed it to her, and I didn't think it was anybody's business. I said, yeah, but Dr. Sheppard, you lied to us at an inquest. You lied, said no. He said, well. So, again, the jury listened. What else is he lying about? What else is he lying about? Did he kill his wife so he could be with this woman? Well, the verdict comes, and he's sentenced to life in prison at the Ohio State Penitentiary. He's guilty of second-degree murder of killing his wife. Of course, he denies it. The Sheppard family this is such a tragic story because it not only affected Dr. Sheppard and his wife being murdered, and the little son now that doesn't have a dad or a mom. He'll be raised by one of Dr. Sheppard's brothers. But Dr. Sam's mother, a week after the verdict came in, he was guilty and was sent to prison. She blew her head off with a shotgun at her house. And her husband, Dr. Sam's dad, ended up dying a month later from ulcers that perforated and stuff because of the stress of the trial. And then Marilyn's father, the wife that was murdered, her dad went out and killed himself too. So there was all this tragedy about, it surrounded this case, not just the murder, but also everything else. Well, of course, Dr. Sheppard sent to the Ohio State Penitentiary. And his brothers believe in his innocence. So they hire a forensic doctor to go into the crime scene and make some observations and see what he can find. Well, he went in, and what he noticed was the police had, down the steps from the upstairs bedroom where Mrs. Sheppard was murdered, there was a trail of drops of blood going down the steps, out the kitchen and out the back door. So the police had taken those wood chips and dug them up and kept them as evidence, the blood samples of the blood that was being dripped down. And when this Dr. Paul Kirk, who the Sheppard family hired a year after the conviction, he tested it, and he came up, he says, well, Dr. Sheppard's blood type was O. Marilyn's blood type was B. The blood that's dripped down the steps now is type A. So he came to the conclusion there was a third person in the house that night, just like Dr. Sheppard said. The other thing he noticed was in the bedroom. The blood splatters from somebody hitting Mrs. Sheppard on the head with whatever, hit her back, I guess, you have a blood splatter. Well, he came to the conclusion that the blood splatters were on that side where a left-handed man was the one that did the crime, and Dr. Sheppard's right-handed. Dr. Sheppard's clothes that he had on that night, on his pants there was a blood spot. They did a test on the blood spot to find out what it was. And here, it belonged to somebody else. It wasn't Dr. Sheppard or Marilyn's blood. Now you got to remember, 1954, all they could do was, there was no DNA or anything like that. All they could do was do blood type tests, stuff like that. So they did that, and they found out that this was type A on his pants. And Dr. Sheppard, like I said, is an O. Well, another thing they noticed, Marilyn, her two front teeth had been busted out of her head. Somebody's hitting her with something, you think you can knock her teeth down her throat. Her teeth broke out and flew backwards. They found them laying at the foot of the bed. And Dr. Kirk wondered about that. And he thinks, what he believed, was that the attacker, Mrs. Sheppard, must have tried to fight back and maybe bit his arm, and when he pulled his arm out, he snapped her teeth out. So the doctor, Paul Kirk, who was a forensic man, who the Sheppard family hired, finally said, I believe that your brother Sam is telling the truth. There's a third person in that house that night because there's these blood evidence. The blood splatters from a left-handed guy. Something's not right here. Enter the famous lawyer F. Lee Bailey. F. Lee Bailey was Albert DeSalvo, the Boston Stranglers' defense attorney. Okay, that was his claim to fame up to this point, or before that. And F. Lee Bailey came in and got wind of the Sheppard trial. The Sheppard family hired him, and he started looking into the trial records and everything, and he found out Dr. Sheppard, his lawyers, first of all, the evidence that was presented in court, his defense lawyers didn't even get to look at it. They suppressed the evidence. Number two is the circus atmosphere of the trial in Cleveland was out of control. The judge walked in like he was a big celebrity and everything, and it was a famous American reporter there named Dorothy Kilgallen, who everybody read back then. She was there. This was a major trial, and all the big newspapers and TV, everybody was there. And Dorothy Kilgallen was in the courtroom one day, and the judge said, "Hey, Miss Kilgallen, come over here." And Dorothy, whenever was talking, she's writing stories about the trial and everything. And Dorothy Kilgallen said to F. Lee Bailey that the judge told me before the trial began that Dr. Sheppard's guilty. We all know that. This is just a formality. He'd already made up his mind that he'd done it. And so she told F. Lee Bailey this. Then they found out all about, how the evidence was suppressed and this new findings by this Dr. Paul Kirk that didn't add up. Well, F. Lee Bailey goes to the Ohio Supreme Court, argues that Dr. Sheppard's constitutional rights were violated, that he was not given a fair trial because of the circus atmosphere the judge let go on in the court, how the evidence was suppressed from the defense, and all these things. And the Ohio Supreme Court agreed. And they let Dr. Sheppard out of prison. He was released in July of 1964. And he got out, and they asked him, of course, how's it feel? He says, I know I got to go through another trial, but at least I'm getting out of here. I've been in it so long. Now, while Dr. Sheppard was in the state pen for 10 years, of course, he wasn't operating as a doctor. He wasn't involved in anything of his work, his practice. So, he lost certain skills and everything. And Dr. Sheppard also joined a wrestling team in the jail, and he wrestled in prison there. When he got up, there was a woman who had been corresponding with him from Berlin, Germany. Her name was Ariana Tobanyans. And they became like pen pals. She actually moved to Ohio, came from Berlin, came to Ohio, took up residence here that someday if Dr. Sam gets out, she kept, like he said, he never lost confidence that he would get out or hope that he would get out. And she and him end up getting married about a month after he gets out of prison. Now, Bailey then takes Dr. Sheppard's case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Famous Supreme Court case, Sheppard versus Maxwell. Supreme Court agreed with the Ohio State Court that Dr. Sheppard's constitutional rights to a fair trial were violated. So F. Lee Bailey wins him a second trial. The second trial starts in September of 1966, and that is when Dr. Paul Kirk comes in and tells his side of what he thought happened, and all the other evidence has come out, and these things. The second jury finds him not guilty, and they release him. Said, Dr. Sheppard, you were railroad. Now, basically, you're gone. Dr. Sheppard, not knowing whether he was going to be found innocent or guilty the second time, actually brought a pistol into court with him. Because when they read the verdict, if they said guilty, he was pulling a pistol out. He was going to kill himself. He said, absolutely, I'm going to either that or the guards in the courtroom are going to shoot me. I'm not going back to jail. So they find him not guilty. Well, as time rolls on, Spencer Houck, who was the mayor of Bay Village and one of Sheppard's best friends that he called on the morning of the murder, found out he'd been sleeping with Marilyn. He'd been having an affair with Marilyn. They found in the coroner's, which never came out, the coroner did all his tests on Mrs. Sheppard's body to determine that he actually made a skull with all these indentations, which, by the way, Mrs. Sheppard didn't die from the hits in the head. She died from her own blood. She drowned in it. All the blood going down her leg. She couldn't breathe. That's how she died. She died of asphyxiation. They also found 2 different sperm samples in Mrs. Sheppard with a vaginal swab. Then there was a man who's the son, and Dr. Sheppard remembered, he was a handyman that they hired to do odd jobs around the Sheppard property. He would clean the windows and put the storm windows in, and when winter was coming, cut the grass, do little things like that. This guy was 24 years old in 1954 when this happened. And his name pops up. Well, they found out that this guy had also been obsessed with Marilyn Sheppard. That he'd come on to her before, and she'd always, brushed him off, blew him away, They found out he had some mental illnesses too, that he was always, had some problems there too. And he was in Ohio State Penitentiary now because he had murdered 2 women, wealthy women in Cleveland, and stole their money and then murdered them, and they finally caught up with this guy. This guy's name was Richard Eberling. And when they went to his place where he lived, when they went to arrest him, the police went through his stuff, they found 2 of Marilyn Sheppard's rings at his house. This was the window washer / handyman at the Sheppard property. Eberling, finally, when he went to prison, he confessed to his cellmate that he was the one that killed Marilyn Sheppard. Whether he was boasting about something or whatever. He said he did. He also said that he doesn't know how Mrs. Sheppard's pants were down when they found her dead body, because he said she was just kicking and screaming, fighting the whole time. He knew inside information about that. And on Richard Eberling's arm, there was a scar that looked like a bite, like a teeth imprint that had been there. Tell it was a deep scar for years. And Richard Eberling kind of would cover that up when people would look at that and say, "What's that from?" "Oh, I did that way back." And, So, Dr. Sam, back to him for a minute. Dr. Sam ends up divorcing the woman he married from Germany, Ariane Tobinians, which her half-sister was Joseph Goebbels' wife. Okay? They end up that. Dr. Sam actually got hired after he got out of prison. He was hired at St. Elizabeth's in Youngstown. He worked there for like 2 years, but because he hadn't been a doctor for 10 years, he did some surgeries, and he slipped and he cut an artery, and the woman died. Another surgery he performed, did the same. So they had to let him go. He killed 2 people on the operating table, not intentionally, but he hadn't been used to being a doctor. Well, a friend that he knew in Youngstown felt bad for him, and said, "Dr. Sam, here, I think you should start, being a wrestler. You wrestled in prison." So he becomes a studio wrestler. Right? He's 45 years old. Because of all the turmoil and the trauma and everything, Dr. Sheppard was into heavy drinking. They said that he drank anywhere from 2/5 of whiskey a day to maybe 2.5, 3/5 of whiskey a day. And he didn't die of liver failure. He died of some complications of, with the liver, everything. I don't know what the exact cause of death was now, I forget. But he ends up dying. He was 45 years old when he passed away. So his little son now grew up, and his little son went on a crusade, like I said earlier, to get his father's name cleared of having anything to do with his mother's death. And he will take on this, this life crusade to free his father's name. And Samuel Reese Sheppard actually went down to the Ohio State Penitentiary, had a meeting with Richard Eberling, the window washer that worked at his house when he was a kid. And he walked in and he says, "Mr. Eberling, do you remember me?" And he went, "No." He says, "I'm Sam Sheppard. I was a little boy. You worked at our..." "Oh, yeah, now I remember you." And they sat down, and Richard Eberling and him were talking, and Richard Eberling sat there and drew, because little Sam hadn't been to the house since he was 7 years, took out that night. He said, "What was my house like?" And Richard Eberling got a piece of paper and he drew an exact diagram of the Sheppard's house, downstairs, upstairs, and everything. And little Sam Sheppard, the son, noticed that scar on his wrist, by his wrist there, his forearm. He said, "How'd you get?" He said, I don't know. I cut myself years. I don't remember how I got anything like that. Well, he goes across the state, and what he does is he ends up getting all the evidence from Cleveland, all of the things that they found out that the wood chip slivers that had the blood drops down the steps, they found out that they actually still had those things in the evidence file. So along comes, of course, DNA. And when they tested those blood strips, it wasn't Dr. Sheppard's DNA and it wasn't Marilyn's. And they couldn't conclusively say it was Richard Eberling's. But they couldn't rule him out either from the DNA of those samples of the wood drops, the chips, the blood drops. Richard Eberling, he could not be ruled out, like I said, 100%. He was, they said, yeah, his DNA is in that blood, but he's one of the whatever people that could have left that, could have been somebody else too. So little Sam sues the state of Ohio for wrongful imprisonment. And now the third trial starts in January of 2000. Dr. Sheppard, of course, has passed away in 1970. The forensic science, everything is brought in, the DNA, all this and that. But the jurors, this was new DNA testimony stuff. Nobody really understood it. I don't know if I'd understand if I was on a jury. But the jury was confused, and when the trial was over, they said the state of Ohio is not guilty of wrongful imprisonment of Dr. Sheppard. A lot of it was too technical, I guess, is what the word is for the jurors. Okay. Richard Eberling dies in prison in 1993. The murder weapon that a lot of people believe now, based on what Richard Eberling slips out once in a while, what he told people, was he had a metal flashlight. The old metal flashlights that are about that long and hard metal, that was probably what he used, and he probably threw it in Lake Erie. Of course, they searched it, but they could never find anything in Lake Erie. And like I said, Dr. Sam's son is still on a crusade. He's 72 years old. And he still travels and speaks and does things trying to eventually get his father's name cleared. And that's what he's looking to do. The Cleveland Press, the Plain Dealer, like I said, they're the reason, one of the main reasons Dr. Sheppard did not get a fair trial the first time, and why he got a second trial. And this was when the DNA come out, and they found that the blood spots, that was a key to the case, because whoever dripped that blood, Sam Gerber, the coroner of Cuyahoga County, and the police thought was Dr. Sheppard's blood dripping off the murder weapon as he took it out back, threw it in Lake Erie. And then they found out it's definitely not Dr. Sheppard's blood. So there was a third person in the house. It was not Marilyn's either. And as the case stands today, Dr. Sheppard, technically on the books, is still the one everybody thinks that they interviewed some of the jurors that sat on the original trial and said, no, evidence presented to us, he's guilty. And the son is still, like I said, on that crusade. Okay? Anything? Chuck?
Mike, did that, Mr. Everling, did he have bushy hair?
Oh, yeah, I forgot. See, I had so many. No, it's been so long since I've done this, this speech. I mean, I went to my files and I said, man, I don't remember any of this stuff. But anyways, Richard Everling was like me, receding. Okay, but he was only 24 years old when he was receding. He wore a wig that was bushy. I forgot to mention that, yeah. Yeah.
Hey,
He
Mike,
did.
obviously, all that stuff is so twisted. I didn't know all of that, but it makes obviously Hollywood took creative license and embellished with the movie a lot with the fugitive. None of that stuff actually happened. Which,
Well-
the movie isn't as crazy as the real thing that happened. But how did they get off track so much on
Well,
the
also, because of this case, the bushy-haired man,
movie? Yeah.
you remember there was a
Came to
TV,
one arm.
I mean, I don't remember watching it. Well, I can't say I never saw. The Fugitive, the TV show that came
Yeah.
out, was about the one-armed, whatever, and instead of the bushy-haired guy. Yeah, that's what came out of this case. So, yeah.
Mike,
Judy.
in what you read, did they say anything about Dr. Sheppard's original defense counsel? Because in hearing that story, it always sounds like he didn't have very good representation.
Well, one of the things is his defense. His last name was Corrigan, and he passed away before the second trial ever happened. He had another lawyer. Well, the judge, like I said, he wouldn't let them see the evidence before the trial. Like, for some reason, they suppressed all this, and that was another thing. F. Lee Bailey argued it in the Supreme Court. Of course, you know F. Lee Bailey became famous for O.J. Simpson and all that in later years when he was on the Dream Team, and I should say the Money Team. Anything else? I mean, I'm sure there's some things that somebody asked, something I maybe might have forgot to say because I don't quite.
She almost ended up in East Liverpool.
What's that?
He almost ended up in East Liverpool
Oh, I
rather
do-
than Youngstown.
Oh, he wasn't down here at the wharf on his bike?
No, I'm talking about the father.
Oh, the father. Oh, okay. I
He
didn't
ended
know
up
that.
in Youngstown.
Youngstown,
but he
yeah.
interviewed with Dr. Hayes.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that. No, I did not know that. Yeah, I knew he worked at St. E's in Youngstown. That's who ended up hiring him.
He never lost his medical license for.
He lost him, but he got him reinstated when they found him not guilty. Oh yeah, he lost his medical, then he got it reinstated. But you know, he was a surgeon, and not being around it, for 10 years, you kind of, it's like if you're a basketball, you don't shoot for 10 years. You got to get your shot back.
Well, you talked about how his brothers, they had the hospital and everything, did the whole hospital and everything closed down?
The whole hospital eventually shut down, and believe it or not, that hospital's still there in Bay Village. The house that the murder happened in, it was tore down in like 1995 for some reason. And the hospital now is like a crossroads out in Calcutta where assisted living. It's an assisted living facility. Tim?
I was curious as to how the son would bring an action against the state of Ohio 30 years after the acquittal
Oh, he did.
for wrongful.
Well, he did.
Must have reopened the estate or something like that.
I can't remember. I think that he was found not guilty at the second trial, but I think everybody still felt he did it and got away with murder, and I think he just wanted to have his father's name totally erased from the crime, that he did not do this, and that's why he sued for wrongful imprisonment. That's what he sued for, but he didn't win.
So when he was found guilty of second-degree murder, so why not first-degree murder?
Because they said it wasn't premeditated. They said that they had a fight and he got into a rage and went and started beating on her.
Okay.
Well, they said he went upstairs and wanted to have, sexual relations with her, and she pushed him away. No, because their marriage was on the rocks. Okay, it wasn't the perfect marriage. Okay, they were having problems. People said that they'd even talked about divorce. But he was cheating on her. She maybe was cheating on
Who
him
knows who the
too.
baby belonged to?
What's that?
Who knows who the baby belonged to?
Well, that's right. I don't know if I don't think they ever. No, back in '54 when they would have done that, I don't know what they would have done to find out, because they definitely didn't have DNA then.
Yeah.
So
Mike, did you ever go rise up the ranks in like the studio wrestling thing that there was actual footage of him doing that in the set? In the late
I forget. I think on the marquee when he wrestled, it was Dr. Sam
Really?
versus George Animal Steel. Hey!
Not Sammy the Killer.
That's what I would have thought. That's what I would have thought. Oh, here's another little tidbit to that story. He divorced, I told you, Ariane Tobadjans in 1968, and he ends up marrying the 17-year-old daughter of his wrestling partner in Youngstown. But it didn't last very long. Well, he didn't last very long, so I'm saying. It was maybe a year. Yeah, she was like 17.
Oh, wow.
Anything else, anybody?
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.